it's not as if we're not playing for high stakes here. 1 in 3 Americans now has either prediabetes or diabetes or on their way to that. Half of Americans die of cardiovascular disease. A third of Americans die of cancer, or among women it's approaching 50%. Get some kind of cancer in their life. We've got to change that, and if we ignore the dietary contributions to this, we're hurting the population. So major medical journals have a responsibility to publish good science. You can publish junk science too, but you shouldn't be out promoting it as if it's fact. It started out very worrisome. It was in late September of 2019, and the Annals of Internal Medicine sent out this very peculiar press release that said new guidelines that there's no need to reduce red or processed meat consumption for good health. There's words to that effect. Mm-hmm. And so reporters thought that this meant that some official body had released some new dietary guidelines and that scientists had all been wrong about the dangers of eating bacon and steak and so forth. And in fact, there were stories saying exactly that. The Wall Street Journal came out saying, all you scientists have been wrong, go ahead and have a steak. Well, it turned out several things. What they were actually talking about was 6 articles that the Annals of Internal Medicine published. The first 3 of them showed that meat really is dangerous. But then the later articles said, well, but people like eating meat. And some people think they need meat. So why should we tell them otherwise? I know that sounds crazy, mm-hmm. but that's what they said. They said you should honor people's preferences, even if they're rather ill-informed. And then the last of the articles was about guidelines. And these were suggested guidelines saying, if we're not so sure whether meat is safe or not, let's tell people they should keep eating it. And that didn't make much sense either, because if you weren't sure if something was risky or not, why would you say that people should definitely keep eating something? So we started thinking, I smell money behind this. Maybe meat industry money? It turned out that one of the authors happened to be the head of Texas A&M University's AgriLife program, which has, according to the Washington Post, conducted $4.5 million worth of beef research in 2019 alone, plus pork research, plus marketing, plus educational programs. This would have killed you. On December 26th, they were celebrating National Bacon Day.
Yeah.
But they did not report in the annals that this author had a conflict of interest. And while this was going on, this same person hired the main researcher in this group, who's named Bradley Johnson. Mm-hmm. He was angling for a job, and this guy hired him at $175,000 a year plus tenure, and none of this stuff was acknowledged. So bottom line, it looked really pretty sleazy. And if you're wondering if bacon is healthy or not, if it's veggie bacon, okay. If it's pork bacon, out.
So I'm gonna have to ask you a tough question. Do you have a second, or is it time to go?
Like a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
That's fine.
So one of the things that was criticized was that you were a signatory on the True Health Initiative letter to Christine Lane, who was the editor-in-chief at Annals, and you guys had requested that they preemptively retract the paper before publication.
Yes.
Could you describe, why you thought that was the right move at the time?
Before these articles came out, I was directly in touch with Dr. Lane. Christine Lane is the editor-in-chief of the Annals of Internal Medicine. Mm-hmm. And I specifically said to her, please correct your press release, number one, because people are thinking that there are some new guidelines coming out from the government saying that meat is healthy. And she said, okay, I'll do that. But I have to say, we never did see a correction. And secondly, I thought the articles had such flaws that they should put them off and should take them back and have another look at them before releasing them. Now, there's all kinds of articles of all different qualities, and they can be published. But these articles had such flaws that we thought they would want to go back to the drawing board and really have a look before releasing them.
Okay.
There was no urgency. The Annals refused. They published them, and every newspaper in the world came out with these ridiculous headlines about red meat being rethought. Anyway, there you have it.
We're back with Dr. Neal Barnard, and we've been discussing the NutriRECs issue with some of the conflict of interest that were discussed. And one of the things that was done, an action that was taken by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine about 3 weeks after the article was published, is it looks like you guys asked the District Attorney of Philadelphia, which is the city where the Annals of Internal Medicine, the journal that the article was published in, you asked the district attorney in Philadelphia to investigate potential reckless endangerment resulting from the publication of the NutriRECs meat papers, and I was wondering if you could describe your motivation for taking this action. Yes. and where this comes from.
Okay, what the Annals did was the Annals of Internal Medicine, which is a well-respected journal, but they issued a press release that they sent worldwide, and it said that there were new guidelines. So reporters would have thought maybe some governmental body issued new guidelines, and the guidelines were that you should continue eating red and processed meat, and that it effectively wouldn't hurt your health. That was the message that seemed to come through. Now, we all know that processed meat increases the risk of colorectal cancer, breast cancer, other forms of the disease, and we felt that it was irresponsible to send around this message. What they could have done was they could have sent around a message saying, we have some new articles that are raising questions about this. That's not what they did. Mm-hmm. And so we asked the district attorney to look into this matter and issue a correction. So we're waiting to hear what happens.
Okay, I appreciate you clarifying that. Mm-hmm. It was one of the things that I thought in the JAMA article, it almost made the plant-based community look, over anxious to kind of snuff this paper out, and that's me editorializing it. But I think, based on your concern, it seems like you guys wanted to make sure that the paper wasn't confusing people and sending a dangerous message out. That's what I'm.
It was a very dangerous message, unfortunately, and the Annals not only sent around a press release, they sent around a video of cuts of meat, and they had the researchers talking about how, in their view, the dangers were exaggerated and all this kind of thing. And I am quite concerned that there would be cardiovascular deaths and cancer deaths and deaths from other causes that would be directly attributable to that. Okay. It was not responsible journalism, in my view.
Well, I appreciate you giving us a chance to get your perspective on it. We love your podcast. We love what you guys are doing. Thanks. At PCRM.
By the way, if you look into it, the number of articles that have come out about this controversy is huge, and virtually all of them take our side to a very substantial degree. But then as that was happening, we started to notice that there were one or two backlash articles, and one was this JAMA one that you mentioned, mm-hmm. where they didn't go into the quality of the articles really. They just kind of ignored that, but they were upset about the fact that there was criticism, and that's what they wanted to focus on. But the truth is that the science of the articles published in the Annals did have some serious questions on it. And
so right. I have a question about that.
Okay, sure.
One of them is, I saw that in the first three parts of the paper, or the first three papers, mm-hmm. was they were looking at some of the randomized control trial data, and they stated in that JAMA article that I think out of the 54,000 people that were included in these randomized control trials, that they did not find a significant association between red meat consumption and heart disease and diabetes and cancer. And that's what, different than what I would expect to see in the controlled trial data. And I'm just kind of curious if you could elaborate on that.
All right. I hope I don't bore your audience to tears with this, but there were 6 articles. The first 3 were about observational studies, where you don't actually do a controlled trial. You just look at what people are eating. And it's the same way as was done a generation ago with tobacco. And people who smoked more had more lung cancer. And if the finding was maybe in one study, you thought maybe it could have been chance. But if it was in study after study after study after study in all different populations all around the world, you think maybe tobacco is linked to lung cancer. And then the meat articles found that people who ate meat had higher risks of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and other problems. And the first 3 articles all found that, and it was a statistically significant difference, meaning it's very unlikely to be chance.
In the epidemiological research.
Right, in the observational studies.
Yeah.
And they kind of poo-poo these, but these are good studies, like the Harvard Nurses study and many others that are the best science we do. And then the 4th article was randomized clinical trials. Mm-hmm. And there they identified only 2 studies that they wanted to talk about. And one of the studies, they said, looked so favorable to getting rid of red meat that they thought it was, they couldn't believe it, so they disregarded it. It's what it was called. Okay. I'm not making this up.
Yeah, this is the story. This is why we want to tell people.
It's called the Lyon trial. They said it was so favorable to getting rid of meat that they just disregarded it. They thought it couldn't be realistic, and they focused just on the Women's Health Initiative, which wasn't designed to eliminate meat, and that wasn't the point of the study. Mm-hmm. And there they felt, well, they couldn't make much of anything out of it. Here's another scandal. They never looked at any of the studies about lowering cholesterol, which happens when you get away from meat, lowering body weight, lowering blood pressure, any of these things. They didn't look at any of those things. They only looked at basically whether you would die of various conditions or have a cardiac event, that kind of stuff. So they just overlooked really important data. You know that if a person is a meat eater and they stop that and they go to a vegan diet, their likelihood of having a heart attack goes way, way down. But they just really disregarded important data.
So in the design of the study, they weren't actually looking at eliminating meat. It was the Nurses' Health Study.
Okay. If you're talking about the randomized clinical trials,
yeah,
they looked at the Women's Health Initiative.
The Women's Health Initiative.
The purpose of that study was not to eliminate meat. That wasn't part of the study.
Yeah.
But in the course of the study, many of the women did make some diet changes, but they said, well, they didn't make much in the way of changes. They didn't get much benefit. Now, the truth is there were some benefits of the study, but none of this means that eating bacon is safe.
Yeah.
And this press release went out basically telling people that sausage and bologna and bacon and salami and all these things, you should, not only that they thought the evidence was unclear, they said you should eat these.
Mm-hmm.
So, wait a minute. Maybe that's the wrong public health message.
Yeah, they did. I believe they said that their guidance was that Americans should not change their habits with eating meat. And that's
exactly, which
sensationalist, you know?
Well, also, it's not as if we're not playing for high stakes here. 1 in 3 Americans now has either prediabetes or diabetes or on their way to that. Half of Americans die of cardiovascular disease. A third of Americans die of cancer, or among women it's approaching 50%. Get some kind of cancer in their life. We've got to change that, and if we ignore the dietary contributions to this, we're hurting the population. So major medical journals have a responsibility to publish good science. You can publish junk science too, but you shouldn't be out promoting it as if it's fact.
Thank you, Dr. Barnard, for being generous with your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for getting the word out.
The American Medical Association, Dr. Barnard has authored key resolutions, now part of AMA policy, calling for a new focus on prevention and nutrition in federal policies and in medical practice. In 2018, he received the Medical Society of the District of Columbia's Distinguished Service Award. Please help me welcome Dr. Neal Barnard.
Don't miss Dr. Barnard's full presentation. Click on the thumbnail that pops up right now. All right, y'all know what time it is. Red Pill Vegan. Next.